بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show, Guest of the Week, coming to you from Sharjah TV. I'm your host Ismail Bullock, and today we want to talk about a bit of an interesting topic, but something we hear from time to time, which is the millennials, those who were born in, you could say, around the millennium time, and always some of the, what you could say, the traits or habits that they're known to have. So we want to kind of discuss this and look at it from an Islamic perspective, which should be quite interesting. And to do that with me is brother, no stranger to the show, of course, brother Almir. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So we always say about the millennials, oh, and these guys do this because they're the millennials, or the millennials are so spoiled, or etc., etc. So we really want to discuss, I guess, first of all, what do we mean by millennials? For those who have heard it but don't really.
Well, there was a psychologist who came up with this term, was accepted back in 1987. I forget his name. Who basically said the people who are growing up, there's a slight difference in the way it is. So then the people that were like baby boomers. So you have the baby boomers, 50s, after the Second World War. Then you have their generation, which is us, the ones who are born 60s and 70s. They call it Generation X. Then the baby boomers come after. So the millennials now, the term was even coined more around, like you said, 2001 and so, for the people who were born in 1982 or 1980 up to 2000, 2001. Meaning that the people who reach adulthood in this millennia. So, in this millennium. So that means, people who become 18, 19, 20 in millennium. So I guess 1982 would qualify and so on. And they noticed some trends. For example, let me give an example. They noticed that baby boomers, they cater their life to be work-centric kind of life. They dedicate themselves to be hardworking, work a lot, and that's why, baby boomers, when they retire, that's going to be like they always say, it's going to be, well, they retired right now, but it would be like strain on the system because there's so many of them having retired because they work so hard, they have pensions.
So these are the generations that are before the millennials?
These are the generations that came after the Second World War. Okay. Then there is the generation 60s and 70s, who were born in 60s and 70s. They call them Generation X. And these people were kind of the generation who put their lives more like work in a life balance. Work hard, but also balance life. Have a nice job, but at the same time enjoy life. This is in psychology, this is what they're talking about, right? And also that divorce rates, for example, we're talking about West, and even in the West and here, we see the same trends when it comes to divorce rates and stuff like that they've increased in this time. More divorces and so on. And
I guess you could say that the first generation that you mentioned, I believe you call it the baby boomers, that they would have had to have really worked hard for their earning. Maybe life was harder then.
Yes.
So they kind of appreciated life more,
Definitely.
Worked hard for it. And then when we come to the Generation X, life is a bit easier. They're reaping the benefits of what the previous generation worked hard for.
You could say that, yes.
So like you said, they can then afford to,
I'm sure you
work
can
quite hard, but we'll also not, have a lot of fun. So
yes.
As it goes down,
yes.
Of course, it can repeat itself in a good way, but there's a trend of people getting less and less productive,
yes.
less and less responsible in that sense.
It could be. There's certain changes I'll mention about millennials, but you always heard your parents, or my parents, I heard, my dad used to always say, oh, when I grew up, it was really hard times. I had to do this to do this. For example, I wanted to have something to do fun for myself. I had to do so much work in the field, for example, growing vegetables or whatever at that time, in order for my dad to give me a little bit of money to go and buy something for myself, like this. And then he would say to me, but you got it all taken care of. You don't have to work as hard as I did. So yeah, there's that dynamic for sure. What the difference with the millennials is that they found out that with this influence of a new digital age, technology, the social media, this is what has changed. And of course, with the advancement and everything in the world, technologically speaking, less work is technically being done also. So it's like a combination of those things. And there happened to be a big disconnect between these generations. Right?
I think even you find, not that I've looked at it from a statistical aspect or studies or anything, but just I can recall now how from different articles you tend to read here and there on the news or whatever, that even people's health has got a lot worse, and people have become more obese and more overweight and more unhealthy physique-wise over time as well. So okay, there are a lot of people now who have the facilities to go to the gym, and there's more options to be healthier in the sense of facilities. But I think you'll find that in trend-wise, because you mentioned there's a lot of technology now, there's a lot of people just relaxing and not having that mentality of working really hard, that they have then, we have seen a surge in health issues and people being obese and overweight and that kind of thing.
Well, you know, it's very good you mentioned that, but you know, with technology, like you said, that public transport has improved. People don't have to have a car in order not to walk. They just take public transport. And they found out, there was a just interesting article maybe 2 weeks ago, that they say that Uganda, for example, Uganda, who would have thought, right? I mean, it's an African country, that they say it's one of the fittest countries in the world. And people said, why? And then the investigators went to see, why is Uganda the most fittest country in the world? One of the most fittest countries. They found out that a lot of people that work, they tend to walk a lot. So they found out, for example, that this person walks in one direction about 7 to 8 kilometers just to get to work. And on the way to work, from work, same thing, plus the work is physical in a way and stuff like that. And this is every day, 5 to 6 days a week. So I mean, you're right about this dynamic that changed. But what changed for millennials even more is that they say about millennials, what's unique is that they grew up from early age with, for example, with social media, right? Or they were exposed to gaming and whatnot and all these platforms like internet and whatnot, right? I mean, before social media, before Facebook and all these things, you had, you know, just basic internet, right? We are also on social media. We are also using internet, but we did not grow up with it per se, right? We would still play. We were not exposed to that as much, or our parents.
Yeah, now it's, for a lot of those people, it's become like part and parcel of their life.
Yes, exactly.
It's like been with them ever since they were toddlers.
So, for example, myself or yourself, you can relate to a life without social media.
Yeah, I can remember up until I was, I mean, I'm not like super old or anything, but I mean, I can remember even when I was a teenager, we had things like the Atari kind of things, with a bouncing ball on the screen, and then maybe like another Commodore 64 computer where you kind of play Pac-Man. But that was like the most we had, and that came later on. I mean,
if I tell my kids or my son, you know, I remember somebody buying a cell phone, and it used to be this huge thing, like.
That's right.
You know, it's like huge, thick, heavy, maybe like a 2 pounds or whatever it was. It's like so huge. It was like almost like a VCR, you know, that size. And then people used that cell phone in the early 90s, whatever it was, so long ago.
I mean, even for, I mean, I
and if I tell that story to my son, he'd be laughing. I was like, what is that? I mean, you know, they can't comprehend that.
Even from an aspect of socializing, I mean, we would always go out on our bikes or ride on our bikes somewhere, or go and play football. So we'd always be active. But nowadays it would be friends come around your house to all sit and play a console game or video game, and everyone just sits there and challenges each other.
Not only that, now people get together to play 1 or 2 or maybe single, and they go online and play.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not even,
so
at least
you
have some
having
interaction.
the normal healthy interaction.
Yeah.
That's why you see so many children, they don't have many friends, or they're not healthy because they're not even going out and doing anything. They're going from school to the TV to the games.
They have their online friends that they've never met.
And they actually call them my friends.
Yeah.
Like
they call them online friends.
You don't even know this
They
guy.
never met them physically. They've spoken to them. I don't know if they even video chat with each other. Maybe they do, but most of the time it's like, you know, this is my buddy. We play games, and he's a good guy, and he's like this, you know, this many time zones away and whatnot, you know. I mean, this is the dynamic. So what has happened is there's been a disconnect between, you could say, baby boomers, Generation X, which is us, and the millennials, especially because that's all they know. Meanwhile, we always like, you know, I keep telling my son, oh, I grew up playing outside all the time. That's what I was doing. I mean, outside of school, in the morning you go to school, you go home, 5 to 6 hours I was outside, weather permitting. That was it. You know, it's very difficult for kids now, and you want them to be outside. You ask them to go outside. You make activities for them, and for them it's like, you know, half an hour is enough. I want to go back in, right? Even though you provide, you try to do these things, but this is the disconnect. So today, just we want to emphasize a little bit, how do we connect with these millennials? Because we do need to connect. And one of the major things Islamically we talk about always, I remember going to Islamic events, conferences and whatnot, you have these huge lectures, right? All day long, lasting each lecture 1 hour, an hour and a half, with a few minutes break in between. And we say, mashallah, you know, kind of proud of ourselves, but we heard previous people that, you know, used to sit not on 1 day or 2 days, they would sit weeks on end like this. Nowadays, it's like if you send somebody a lecture that's 45 minutes long, they're like, man, that's too long. Yeah, so all these reminders, all these things are like 2 minutes, 45 seconds. Now they even have this 1 minute reminder. It's like, just give me 1 minute of your time. You know, and mashallah, our da'is, you know, they're trying to tell them about Islam in 1 minute, because the attention span is so short, and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati al hasana." So Allah says, call, invite all the way to your Lord with wisdom and counsel. And you know, nowadays we have to use our wisdom and our minds and our different ways of attracting these youth more than ever before, because of the way the social media, the way they grew up also has happened, right? So one of the first tips that I would like to give to, you could say, parents, guardians, elder, not older people, just somebody who's not millennial, is to stay up to date with the social media. Not in a sense that you yourself get a Facebook account or, you know, Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, but more like be aware of what's going on, what's trending, what's clicking out there, right? It's like, give an example. I love sports, and I follow sports, right? I'm the old school guy. I have an app with a sports app that I refresh, for example, some game I'm following. I may be not watching the game, I don't have time, but I will, you know, refresh to see the score, or it'll give me this way. My kids, for example, no, they're on a Twitter. They're not on any website, sports website, giving them information about this. They're on Twitter. How many tweets come because somebody scored a goal, and it's like this tweet comes like, yes, he scored a goal. Did you see this goal? Small video like this. And this is how, for example, my son gets information. Did you see that? Did you hear that? I'm like, yeah, I did. And I'm like, where did you hear it? He's like, on Twitter. So Twitter has become, in a way, like, so I have to be aware a little bit how he gets his, for example, scores and stuff like that. I mean, it's not important, but just the dynamic is a little bit different. How we perceive information, how we digest information versus the millennials. There's a bit of a difference. So this is one of the things that I would say, how to stay up to date with the, for example, another thing is with the teenage boys is infatuation among youth, for example, has become this game Fortnite, right? Everybody's playing it. So we're not saying is you go and get a Fortnite account and play yourself. We're just saying and understand the dynamic, why people are infatuated with it, and how we can use this to work with the Muslim youth organizations and how to incorporate this. Because if we say, don't do it, or something like this, or stay away from it, it's in this way it's difficult to do these things. You have to be careful.
Okay, I'll just hold you on that point there. We'll just go for a quick break. Join us, inshallah, after this break. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back. Now, just before the break, we mentioned some of those games that probably many of us know the names of, that become very, very popular, very addictive. And I remember seeing, before you continue, I remember seeing a report. I was actually in Europe at the time, and I was actually back in the UK then, and visiting, and there was a report on television about many parents saying how they actually saw how their children completely changed because of playing a particular well-known famous game that everyone's pretty much playing these days, and that it had changed the way the child was. She'd seen the change in him and how he'd become almost addicted. And then they had a psychologist who was saying that, and I know there may be people watching this now who play it because they're like 19, 20, 21, 22, and they might actually be laughing at this because they think it's really exaggerated. But the woman was saying, look, many of these children, not saying everybody, but many of them, they get the typical symptoms of someone who's addicted. He wants to do anything to get his fix. So in this case, to play that game. If you try and take that game away from him, he becomes annoyed, depressed, aggressive, angry. So they were saying it's literally the same kind of pattern. It's an addiction. So they're saying it has an effect on, and that's why some countries or some people are trying to recommend that certain games are banned in certain places, or they're given a certain age limit, or that they're, or they're at least saying to the parents, limit the time that your children are playing these kind of games.
True, and they've just come up last year, I think, with the disorders for these things. They have specific names, addiction to games. And
that was actually the report that this place in the UK was one of the first in the world to actually have a department that treat addiction.
They've come up with the definition. They've come up with the signs and symptoms or whatever this is. And also they've recommended some things, you could say, how to deal with it. I would say, like, my kids play games, but the important thing is that you keep communication with them and see why the reason they're playing the games, and see if you can limit it. Playing is okay. What are you going to do? They're going to play. But you have to limit it in the scope of their schooling, of their social life outside of gaming, because for them, trust me, social life means also gaming. So they see the same thing, talking to their parents, siblings, interacting at a dinner table sometimes. They would see that also talking to their friends as socializing. But there's a difference, right? So that way. Another way is that, another thing that you just mentioned is, yes, there's one famous place that's very gaming addicted. It has very fast internet, it's known, without mentioning the name of the country. And they have a huge problem with this, that they've actually created these, you could say, rehabilitation centers for gaming.
Yeah, there's even now...
and this country is famous for that. So people actually who want to open a rehab center in their country, they go to this country to get like an education type of, or exposure to this type of rehab, so they can implement the same thing back in their country.
I mean, they even added, like I said, when I was in the UK and I saw on the television, they were mentioning that there was a particular hospital that had now actually entered within the department for psychological and mental illnesses was gaming addiction. It's a new specialization where you can go and be treated for schizophrenia, depression. Now it is gaming addiction. It's one of the mental illnesses added to the treatment in this particular hospital. So whether or not, obviously we're not, going to go into the clinical psychology side of things, but it just shows you that there definitely is an issue out there, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
For sure. And I mean, this place is known for extreme gaming, where people game for 3 days straight without sleeping. I mean, this is another level. When we talk about gaming, we may think like, oh, our kids or whatever play 5-6 hours straight or whatever, but this is another level. So so imagine that problem. Now, what I want to say is, I remember back in 2004, a friend of ours, you met him, Kevin, he had a gaming shop, right? And one of the things that he saw at that time, subhanAllah, at that time, he saw that in order to attract youth, you have to give an environment to them that their peers like, right? But at the same time, make it Islamic, bring them in the fold. So one of the tips that we say, organize, like, for example, games as a group, get them to come, interact with them, and at the same time, pray together, right? Have dinner together, but at the same time, let them have fun, game with them, stuff like that. So we used to, I remember, play one of the games a long time ago. It was like you're playing, there was up to 16 players on 4 TVs. And imagine that, you play against each other. It was for fun, but it was such a great time that everybody had. And those kids, they remember so many years later. Now they're grown to be adults. They're married, having children. This is 15 years ago almost. And subhanAllah, imagine that they will remember this and they say, you know what? I didn't know that the Muslims could have fun, or that, it's not all about practice, go pray, do this, So it's like we have to reach to them. Whatever they're at, we have to come to that level, because otherwise we lose them. We also will say that, what does it mean to reach to them? Physically, we have to be reaching out to them. Not just talk at them or to them. We need to come where they are and what level they are at. For example, we found one of the youth organizations, they found that, subhanAllah, that the kids, they love Islam, they love the masjid, but they don't come as often, or they don't come as much as they should be. So they found out that these kids, they do, for example, ride bike a lot. So some of the brothers in the community, they said, you know what, let's join them in riding the bikes. That way we come to their level, we meet them, we talk to them. So you meet them at their places of interest. So you develop this stronger relationship with them. And it is mentioned in the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ wrestled with one of the persons, and after that he invited him to Islam. So it's not like something new. Prophet ﷺ, mashallah, may Allah reward him, may Allah bless him for what he did for this ummah. It's amazing. And from his example, we see that how did he do da'wah to people? How did he give da'wah? In so many ways. With every person, he knew what would trigger that person, or what would arouse, you could say, excitement about Islam in him. And he would approach it from that angle. If he told somebody, don't be rough, for example, with his treatment, maybe on some person that will work, but on the other one, it was, instead of being don't be rough, be nice, or do this. It works differently with everybody. So everybody has different, you could say, triggers and so on and so forth. Also, what we need to do, we need to start younger, meaning that we have to get our youth sooner to interact with us. Give them some kind of responsibility, be it at a community organization, be it in your family. Involve them early, make them feel important. And because the more you leave them in this day and age of social media, the more away they can get.
I guess a good thing to do is try and involve them in some kind of, even team sports, try and involve them to get them involved from young in a football team, in a martial arts team, something like this, where they will feel some kind of connection, and they'll feel like it's another, for lack of better words, another family or another community, and at least they'll be doing some exercise, something that's actually useful for them, rather than just sitting at home attached to the television screen playing console games.
Yes, and this is the time where you mold the youth, where it can be molded, right? There's a famous Turkish proverb where it says, a tree that is young bends, or a tree bends while it's young, right? Meaning that you could shape it still. There's ways to do it. Once the tree becomes rigid and older, once you try to bend it, what will happen? It will break, or it will deform, or something will happen. So for us, we need to relate to them as much as we can, even though, a lot of times you don't enjoy it yourself to go to this level to relate. But in order to save, you could say, the generation, you need to do this. And we've seen this with different platforms, different people. For example, let me give you an example, famous, because my kids, they memorized Quran. They went to memorize Quran in many schools. And there are different methods of people how they memorize Quran. For example, you have certain hufad, mudarrisin, teachers from Africa, that their way of memorizing Quran is totally different than somebody who's from Asia, or somebody who's from the Middle East, from Khalij or something like this. Totally different. I'm not saying it's wrong, but for example, for them, because they didn't have papers, they didn't have mushaf, they memorized by listening to each other, by vocalizing. So they would do this, and they expect, even now, 50 years later, where now everybody has a mushaf, everybody's got tapes, everybody's got CDs, MP3s, whatever, that they could listen also while they're reading. They're still sticking to the old ways. And you know what? It doesn't work. But for them, because it worked for them, halas, it should work for everybody else. And then you have the newer generations like, okay, let's do it this way. Let's do, instead of having a whole mushaf, let's have each juz like this, and let's go juz by juz. I mean, there are different ways. So one has to be able to change. Of course, not change to change your principles, change your, you could say the way Islam is. No, just change the ways how you approach dawah and be flexible in these things. Otherwise, we may lose these millennials or the ones even who come after them, right? So that's another thing. Tip number 4: to address issues that are relevant and relatable. We have to address, because we need to speak to them, because we need to see what they're triggered by, what they're relating to. One of the researchers done that, subhanallah, the average attention of a human nowadays is like somebody's attention to get average is about 8 seconds. And believe it or not, we always make fun of the goldfish and its memory, right? It's like, oh, your memory is like goldfish, right? We hear that a lot. Meanwhile, the goldfish has an attention of 9 seconds. So we are slightly below that.
But it's like what you said nowadays, and I don't necessarily agree. People might say, I don't have time. It's not reality, because they'll go to the cinema and watch a movie for a couple of hours. But like you said, you see that where you put a clip these days for 1 minute or 2 minutes, so maybe millions of people will watch it, or hundreds of thousands. But you put another clip for 15, 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, like you said, a lecture, you'll see maybe 1,000 people watched it. But you see that one that was 2 minutes long, 200,000 maybe have watched it.
Exactly. Very true. You have the senior scholars on YouTube, you'll find their videos, 30,000, 50,000. But then you see somebody who's not a scholar, I'm not saying it's wrong, right? And he's got millions of views. Because, the camera work, the message is correct. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the time has changed how things are being portrayed. So, for example, how you approach these youth, you have to give them something interesting, some kind of interesting, catchy topic to attract them. Then approach the angle differently. And maybe back in the day when me and you were used to attending lectures, instead of having a 1 hour, 1 hour and a half lecture, give them a 10-minute lecture, 15-minute lecture with interaction. Let them interact with you and talk to you. Nowadays, what we found out, for example, is also that when you come to youth and you mention something they cannot relate to, it's very difficult to relate to. But of course, we know the hadith, to do adhkar, for example, thousands of times a day, do this. This may not work with these millennials. So we have to approach it in a different way. Yes, I'm not saying not to talk about these hadith and these adhkar, of course, but we have to mention something else, and then so they can get to that way where they would love it, learn it, and then implement it later on. But to start off like that, there's a little bit of, you could say, hard time. You would have a hard time with them.
We can also address to them or bring to their attention the fact that Prophet ﷺ said that the most beloved deeds to Allah are the ones that are consistent, even if they're small.
Yes,
so we can emphasize that on them. We can emphasize on them trying to consistently do the smaller deeds, but is consistently, regularly, is more beloved to Allah than you do lots of like big things and then you stop. On that note, we'll take a break again. Join us inshallah after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. So in the last part of the show, obviously we've got a few more points to discuss. So before the break, I mentioned on the point that some of them have we mentioned the fact that they have a short attention span, and we mentioned that at least we should try and encourage them to do those deeds that are small, but they can be done consistently. And that's what the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, obviously, as we mentioned, he said those are the deeds that the best of deeds, really, the ones that are continuous, even if they're small in number. So we don't want them to come and for 2 weeks be very active and lots of long lectures, and then they stop for months. So like you said, let's try and introduce to them something about Islam that's maybe 10, 15 minutes.
Sure. And another thing, one of the ways to have wisdom is to give to say things, right things, at right time, right place. So you have to choose. And I made one mistake with, it just was mentioned to me last night. I guess my son, after Isha prayer, he was playing with the kids outside, his friends. A few years ago this was. And Isha was early or whatever, it was like maybe 8 p.m., 9 p.m. And I walked by, I was coming back to the house or something like that. And I saw my son and I said, isn't it bedtime? Isn't it time for bed? It was like a simple question. I didn't pay attention. And my son just mentioned to me last night how embarrassed he was in front of his friends when I said that. And it was more like, I didn't mean anything bad by it, but it was not the right time to say it. Even though he was going to finish with them and go to bed, right? But it's these things that can affect our youth, our millennials, in this way that it stays with them for a long time. So part of the reason, like I said, saying things at the right time, the right place, the right moment, and the right way of the way you are saying it, of course. Another way of getting close to millennials is, of course, as with anything, is food. Food, games, organize, food. Because if you come to somebody and you say, قال الله, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, and go with this right away off the bat, yes, of course, this works with people who are attached to Islam, but somebody you're trying to bring in closer, this may not work. Yes, the ultimate goal is to come back to Allah, right? So you have to choose a way how to do this. So one of the ways is to do it is, have some snacks, some food, organize some games, and then in between, incorporate some dawah with it, of course, and then reminding with the verses of Quran and so on. So in the West, for example, what a lot of community centers have done, not only you have a masjid, right? You also have a center next to it for youth. So it's like a center for everything. So you invite youth, have the activities for them, be it sports activities, be it games or whatever it is, some interaction, and then at the same time, masjid is next door, so salah is being paid on time, adhan calls. So because this way, we found out that this works the best. And to be honest with you, where we faced the most resistance against this idea, it was not from, let's say, Generation X, like it was baby boomers. It was the elder, 60 and above, 70 and above. They say, what is this? Why would you want to bring basketball into the masjid or football? It's not particularly in the masjid, but it's in the complex, right? Why would you do that? This is wrong. How can you do this? And we're trying to explain to them, uncle, this is not the time where you grew up, how you grew up, and how you separate your playground, where you played whatever sport you were playing, and the masjid. Time has come differently because a lot of kids, they come to play, but you want them at the same time to come to the masjid. And a lot of times they will pick either or. They will not pick both.
And not just that, the fact, if we don't make an environment, especially in the non-Muslim countries, where the people can be, well, for lack of better words, under our eye, they will go to playgrounds and be exposed to alcohol, drugs, smoking, just bad behavior generally. So we have to also at the same time, like I said, we're not playing football inside the mosque, like you mentioned, making the mosque a playground. Like you said, many times
it's not in the gray area.
Many times it's a backyard. Many times it's a hall that has been purchased with the mosque.
Exactly.
And it's a sports hall anyway. So we should, like you said, to attract these millennials, do these kind of activities. We don't, strike that balance between, which many people are doing, strike that balance so that they can see that you can be religious, but you can also have fun in a halal way. You can have activities, you can socialize. Like you said, it's not like the baby boomer generation where this is a mosque, why would you do this? No, there's a middle, there's a balance in it all.
True. So we have to learn other ways. And another way to connect with the youth, with the millennials, I should say, is that we need to understand that I think we talked about this before. We said we have these du'at on internet doing so many things for dawah, and yet their efforts doesn't even compare to somebody who's a famous Muslim superstar, athlete superstar, right? Such as a football superstar or MMA or rugby, you know, without mentioning the names, right?
And then it's true. And then you'll see the quotes of a general quote like, "We should pray to Allah and be humble to Him," such and such person, and it will go like millions of
Crazy. I mean,
broadcasts.
I'm amazed.
And in a way, unfortunately, many of the time, the Muslims will be sharing that particular quote of that particular boxer
Yes.
or MMA fighter more than the
Brother,
Prophet ﷺ himself or the famous
Ismail,
scholars.
it's not even a quote. It's a picture of this famous superstar athlete sitting in tashahhud, you know, about to finish his prayer from the profile, from the side. That's all. And that's being shared in media, and it goes viral. Millions likes and posts, and look at this, mashallah. And you know, subhanallah, these athlete superstars, may Allah reward them, who are doing this, they don't understand the impact they have on our youth and our millennials, and how important they are. Without even, they're not, they may not be knowledgeable in Islam. They're ordinary, you could say, I don't want to say ordinary knowledge, but they're not scholars, right? And yet they reach so many people with their behavior. MashaAllah, some of them have excellent behavior, the way they interact with non-Muslims, the way they interact with everyone else. And the impact they have, it's amazing. And subhanAllah, Allah will reward them for that, if, you know, they keep it up and so on. And we need to understand that dynamic with them. So one, nowadays, you know, back in the day, you could say, but playing these sports is not allowed, or there's an issue, is ikhtilaf, or this and that. We need to move beyond that. Not to say that this is not haram or halal. We need to know what it is for what it is. I've come in to hold the opinion that, look, if the certain rules of Islam are not broken, awrah is not exposed, and all these things, and salah time is not avoided, then it's not haram, right? So we go with that. Yes, you could say it could be a waste of time playing these things, but nowadays, you mentioned something beginning of the show which was like, a lot of people nowadays are obese, overweight, and these sports, if people are playing these, this will count actually as a physical exercise, which actually might be commanded for them to do, right? In order to be active, because for some people, this is the only activity they have in the day. If they don't play sports, or they don't do some activity like this, they will not be exposed to any physical activity, even walking. And therefore,
Yeah, I guess there has to be balance. We know the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they used to horse ride, they used to do things like archery, they used to wrestle. So they, you know, they did physical exercise. So I guess there needs to be we need to strike a balance, basically.
yes. And you know, subhanAllah, there was this famous soccer player in England who, after he finished the match, the next day he was praying Isha prayer in the masjid there. And he helped clean the bathroom and the wudu area. And it was like somebody was recording him. It was not even him, you know, and he went viral. Look at this guy, so humble. He's cleaning the masjid. And he was not looking for, you know, it was somebody in the masjid who recorded and posted on their profile, and they get the views and whatnot. But I mean, these things, subhanAllah, go crazy, you know, and mashallah, everybody's like, you know, look at this guy, he's got all this money, and he's doing this. And you know, it's a good message for youth to say, look, no matter what you do, no matter who you are and what's your status, you can still be a simple person and do good things. So we have to use that medium, you could say, and attract our millennials into that. So this is one way relate to, I guess, sports and these superstars, right? For example, we've seen also with MMA, the practicing Muslims, that attracts a lot of attention. And of course, you know, on many levels, even not on, you could say, on TVs and whatnot that we watch, these MMA fighters or whatnot, it's more like even on local levels we see somebody looks up to somebody and this person is praying, and all of a sudden, mashallah, he goes and he starts praying because his coach is praying, right? So we need to connect with these people in that way as well. And the last point I would like to mention is always, and it's the most important point, is we need to approach Muslim millennials with mercy and compassion. Just like the hadith of Prophet ﷺ said, respect your elders, right? Have mercy for youngsters. And we need to do this as much as possible because, you know, our generation, baby boomer generation, we have lots of, you could say, life experience, right? We can relate to so many things, and we can sometimes, just by looking at things the way they're turning out to be, we can predict certain outcomes, right? We can predict certain outcomes, the way they're going to be, they're going to end. And at this moment, we need to help our millennials not to maybe reach that outcome that's not desired, you know, undesired outcome, you could say. We want to reach outcome that's different, that's successful outcome, and we can point them to that, but we need to be patient, have mercy, have compassion, because that's what the Prophet ﷺ did and we have so many examples from him, how he treated the youth, how he treated others among the Sahaba, and those who were non-Muslim as well, how he treated them and giving them dawah and so on. So we need to incorporate that and be always mindful of that. Even though they're younger than us, they should listen to us, but we should kind of give them a little bit of a leeway when it comes to that.
That's correct. Well, Jazakallah khair for coming on.
Jazakallah.
And may Allah reward you all for tuning in. And inshallah, we've got some good tips there to take away and hopefully use with that generation or with our children who may be in that generation, inshallah. And until next time, same place, bi'idhnillah. I leave you as always with the greetings of Islam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.